Hey guys, tonight we're taking a slow walk into the kind of evening that feels like it was designed by someone who really understood the art of going nowhere in particular. It's the sort of place where the air smells faintly of wood smoke, the ground feels just damp enough to keep the dust down, and the world moves at a pace that could lull even the most over-caffeinated mind. And I'll be honest, if you actually lived here a few centuries ago, you probably wouldn't survive long enough to post about it. Between questionable water quality, shoes made of basically cardboard, and the occasional plague, your odds weren't great. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, leave a comment with your location and local time, because I love seeing where these nighttime wanderings are reaching people. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the edge of a river that looks like it's been holding its breath for 100 years. The surface is glassy, but it's not the kind of stillness that feels dead. It's the stillness that listens. Along the banks, a dozen or so paper lanterns bob gently, tethered to thin cords so they don't drift away completely. Each one is the color of faded apricot, their light warm and forgiving, like a candle seen through old parchment. The air carries the faint scent of wet earth and cooked rice. Somewhere far off, you think you hear a bamboo flute, but it might just be the wind curling through the hollow stems of reeds. You step onto the wooden walkway, its boards softened and slightly warped from decades of rain. Beneath your feet, you hear that small, friendly creak that says, "Yes, this path has been here longer than you have." It's the kind of sound that belongs in memory more than reality. As you walk, you notice the villagers aren't in any rush. People here seem to measure time by the pace of a drifting lantern rather than the tick of a clock. Historically, river lantern festivals weren't just for decoration. They were part of ceremonies meant to guide spirits, mark seasonal changes, or honor ancestors. The earliest recorded versions in East Asia date back more than 1,000 years, when communities used floating lights to symbolically carry away misfortune. Here, though, the meaning seems more private. The lanterns don't carry messages written on paper slips. They carry something quieter, something you can't quite name. A boy runs past, barefoot, holding two unlit lanterns. He glances at you with that universal kid expression that says, "You're obviously not from here." You're not offended. After all, you aren't from here, and your shoes probably give you away faster than anything else. He disappears into a narrow side street lined with houses that lean toward each other, as though whispering secrets across the path. The night grows cooler, and you can feel that damp river air starting to settle into your clothes. Above you, strips of cloth hang between poles, fluttering gently in the breeze. The patterns on them are faded, swirls, flowers, maybe clouds. But the edges are frayed in a way that makes you wonder how many rainy seasons they have survived. One widely accepted fact: lanterns like these were often made with frames of split bamboo, covered with rice paper, and lit with small oil lamps or candles inside. They were surprisingly delicate. Just one strong gust or careless spark could turn them into drifting fireballs. One lesser-known detail: in some villages, people would name their lanterns before setting them afloat, giving them titles like "Return Home," "Clear Sky," or "Don't Trip on the Steps," which was more practical than poetic. The idea was that the lantern became a little envoy, carrying a wish, a joke, or a reminder downstream. Historians still wonder if the very first lantern festivals were inspired by simple practicality. People just needed light on the water to fish at night, or if they began purely as ritual. The truth, as with most old traditions, is probably a mix. You pass a stall where an old woman is painting fresh lanterns, her brush moving in slow, deliberate arcs. She doesn't look up, but she hums a tune, soft, repetitive, like a lullaby meant to keep the paint from smudging. The smell of her workspace is a blend of wood shavings, lamp oil, and something sweet like candied ginger. You realize the entire process of making and lighting these lanterns must have been repeated thousands of times. Over generations, each one slightly different, yet always part of the same rhythm. As you stand there, one of her finished lanterns catches your eye. It has a pale blue pattern of waves curling toward a tiny painted boat, Without thinking, you imagine that boat carrying away some small worry of yours. The painted water calm but determined. You keep walking, following the soft halo of lanterns along the river's edge. Their reflections ripple, breaking into liquid stars whenever a fish disturbs the surface. Somewhere upriver, someone lets go of a new lantern, and you watch it drift into view, joining the others like it's always belonged here. The night is so gentle that you almost miss the fact that the air is slowly filling with mist. Not the kind that swallows the world, but the kind that softens it. The far bank begins to fade into watercolor grays. Sound becomes muffled, and the river lanterns seem to glow brighter, their light bending in the haze. You get the sense that if you keep walking into the mist, you might not come back out quite the same. But that's okay, you didn't come here to stay the same. You push open the shop door and it gives a soft clink, not the usual metallic jingle of bells, but the faint chime of a single crystal, hanging from a thread above the frame. The air inside is warmer than the street outside, dense with the smell of oiled wood, candle wax, and the metallic tang of clock springs that have been wound and rewound for decades. The light in here isn't so much dim as it is layered. Pockets of brightness fall where they please over a workbench cluttered with tools, across the polished glass face of a grandfather clock, onto the golden eyes of a cat who is currently doing an excellent impression of a taxidermy exhibit. She sits perfectly still on the counter, tail wrapped neatly around her paws, and watches you as though you've just walked into her house uninvited. You give her a polite nod. She blinks once, slowly, then looks away in that studied feline way that says, "You're beneath my concern, but I'll keep you in my peripheral vision." The clockmaker appears from behind a curtain of hanging watch chains. He's thin, with a back that's permanently bent forward, his hands delicate and stained faintly with brass polish. His glasses magnify his eyes in a way that makes it hard to tell if he's surprised to see you or simply always looks like that. "Ah," he says, voice low and dry, "you're just in time." You check your watch out of reflex, then realize he's probably said that to every customer for the past 50 years. He steps aside, revealing a wall entirely covered in clocks, grandfather clocks, carriage clocks, mantle clocks, cuckoo clocks, and even a few strange handmade devices with faces shaped like moons or suns. Each one ticks at its own pace, some loud and commanding, some barely audible, like shy children in a room full of loud cousins. One widely accepted fact: mechanical clocks first became common in Europe in the 14th century, driven by weights and regulated by a verge escapement. They were often inaccurate by modern standards, losing or gaining minutes a day, but they were revolutionary for communities that previously relied on sundials, water clocks, or church bells. One lesser-known detail: in some small towns, the clockmaker's shop doubled as the local time authority, not because the clocks were perfectly precise, but because the clockmaker had the social authority to say, "It's 3 o'clock now," and everyone simply agreed. Historians still wonder whether the very earliest portable watches were worn more for status than for practical timekeeping. The first examples were often so inaccurate that they were, at best, symbolic, more jewelry than instrument. The old man gestures toward a table in the center of the shop. "Tea?" he asks, as though you'd already agreed to sit and drink with him. You do sit, because the chair looks like it's been patiently waiting for you since before you were born. The cat leaps silently from the counter to the tabletop, landing without so much as a sound. She sits again, neatly, and stares directly into your soul. The clockmaker pours tea from a small ceramic pot, the kind with a handle that looks like it might break off if you breathed on it too hard. The tea is dark, slightly bitter, with a smoky aftertaste. He doesn't add sugar. You suspect sugar is a modern indulgence he doesn't entirely approve of. "Do you want to know the time?" he asks suddenly. You glance at one of the clocks on the wall. "Isn't that obvious?" you reply. He smiles faintly. "Not the time on the clock. The time. The kind that matters." Before you can ask what he means, he leans back in his chair, folds his hands, and begins speaking in what sounds like a riddle. It is a number that grows but cannot be counted. It is a thing you can keep but never hold. It is what makes the young old and the old stories. The cat blinks at you again, like she already knows the answer and is mildly disappointed you don't. You say nothing because you're not sure if this is a trick question or the start of a very strange sales pitch. He nods, as though your silence was the correct response, and takes a slow sip of tea. Somewhere in the shop, a cuckoo clock calls the hour, but its timing is wrong. The sound is late, several seconds after the other clocks have marked the moment. The old man doesn't correct it. You wander to the back of the shop, tracing your fingers along the cool glass domes covering intricate mechanisms. One clock is shaped like a spiral staircase, each step holding a tiny gear. Another is carved entirely from dark wood, the hands of the clock forming the outstretched wings of a bird. From the corner of your eye, you think you see the cat following you, but when you turn, she's already back on the counter, grooming herself. It's possible she can teleport. Some clocks, the old man says from across the room, don't tell time at all, not in the way you think. They tell you how long until a thing happens, a harvest, a wedding, a goodbye. People used to keep that counted down, not a... You pause because you can imagine that. A device not for keeping track of now, but for keeping track of how much time is left. The shop feels different suddenly, like every ticking clock is not marking minutes, but quietly warning you that they're running out. The cat jumps down from her perch and walks toward the door, her tail curling into a perfect question mark. She sits there, looking back at you as though to say, your time here is done. You turn to thank the clockmaker, but he's already busy winding one of the taller clocks, his lips moving as if speaking to it in a language you don't know. When you step outside, the crystal above the door chimes again, and the sound seems to follow you down the street long after the shop has disappeared from view. You find the alley almost by accident. One moment you're walking down a wide, friendly street lined with shop windows and potted plants. The next you notice a gap between two buildings, just wide enough for a person to slip through if they turn sideways, and commit to the idea that their clothes might brush against old stone. It's the kind of gap you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for trouble, or secrets, or both. The entrance is framed by bricks the color of burnt sugar, their surfaces worn soft by centuries of rain and fingertips. Above, laundry hangs between the windows like a series of flags marking some quiet territory. You take a step inside and the sound changes instantly. The chatter from the street disappears, replaced by a muted hum. Not silence, just muffled voices. The kind you hear through a closed door when you can't quite make out the words, but you're sure they're talking about something you'd want to know. The cobblestones under your feet are uneven, each one shaped slightly differently, as if they were placed when hand in an era when flat wasn't a high priority. Your shoes click softly on the stones, and the sound feels too loud here. A cool draft brushes against your ear, carrying with it the faint smell of baking bread, wet stone, and, strangely enough, freshly ironed linen. You can't tell if it's coming from ahead or behind, or if the alley itself is exhaling. One widely accepted fact: narrow medieval alleys, often called lanes or wynds, were common in European towns before the concept of wide, planned streets. They were practical for foot traffic and livestock, but also created microclimates where sound and smell lingered. One lesser-known detail: in some towns, alleys were used as informal information networks. Vendors, servants, and neighbors could exchange news without being overheard by the important people on the main street. You didn't need a printing press when you had a lane where everyone talked. Historians still wonder whether some of the gossip recorded in town chronicles came directly from these hidden spaces. Were they community lifelines or rumor factories? The truth, as always, is probably both. You take another step and feel the air shift again. This time, the whispering seems to grow clearer, as though you're passing an invisible threshold. Words begin to form in the murmur, still not distinct, but rhythmic. You think you hear laughter, the kind that's half amusement, half disbelief. A window opens somewhere above you, and the scent of warm soup spills into the alley. The window closes again almost immediately, but the smell lingers, mixing with the scent of stone and dust. The walls on either side seem to lean inward, like they're conspiring to keep you close. Their surfaces are marked with faint scratches, some accidental, some deliberate. You see initials carved into the stone, some fresh, others so old they've nearly faded into the wall entirely. You wonder if those names meant love, friendship, or simply boredom. Up ahead, the alley curves slightly, and you can't see where it leads. The curve feels intentional, as if the street was designed to hide its own ending. You pass a wooden door so narrow it could only be the entrance to a storage room, or maybe a stairwell that no longer exists. Somewhere behind that door, you imagine a room where time has slowed to match the pace of the alley. Maybe it's full of mismatched chairs and half-burnt candles. Maybe there's a ledger on the table listing debts that have been owed for decades. The whispers continue, brushing against the edge of your hearing. You catch a few fragments. Something about a missing key, a pair of boots left outside, a name spoken twice in quick succession. The words could be real, or they could be nothing more than wind slipping through the cracks between bricks. You stop walking for a moment just to listen. The sound feels older than the voices themselves, like the stones are playing back conversations they overheard centuries ago. You imagine them layered, one over another. Wedding arrangements, market haggling, warnings about rain, arguments about bread prices, secrets shared after sunset. A cat darts out from a shadow ahead, its paws silent on the cobblestones. It glances at you briefly before disappearing into a gap in the wall. The gap is small, barely wider than your arm, but you can hear faint scratching on the other side. You walk on. A small archway appears on your left, its keystone carved with a design that might be a flower, or might just be erosion pretending to be art. You glance through it and see another alley crossing yours at a right angle. For a moment you consider turning, but the whispers in your current path seem to tug you forward, curious to see if you'll follow. The light here is softer, as though the sun has decided this part of the city doesn't need full brightness. Your footsteps slow without you meaning them to. Even your breathing falls into sync with the low, steady murmur that fills the air. Somewhere ahead, you think you see movement, a figure turning the corner just out of sight. You can't be sure, and you don't speed up to check. This is not an alley for rushing. By the time you reach the end, the voices fade, replaced by the sound of the busier street beyond. You step out into the sunlight again, and for a moment you feel like you've left a theater in the middle of a play. The smell of bread is gone, the soup is gone, and the laundry above is just laundry again. But you keep the whispers in your mind, turning them over like coins, wondering if you were meant to hear them, or if they were just waiting for anyone who would listen. You first hear about the bridge from a man selling roasted chestnuts at the edge of the square. He tells you in a voice so casual it almost sounds like gossip that if you cross it at night and whisper your true name, the bridge will remember it. Forever. When you ask him what that means, he just shrugs, as if you're the one who should already know. The bridge isn't hard to find. It sits just beyond the edge of the village, where the ground dips toward a slow, dark river. You see it before you hear it. Wooden planks weathered to a silvery gray, railings patched and repatched with mismatched boards. The surface is uneven, slightly bowed in the middle, as though it's grown tired of standing straight after decades of holding up the weight of footsteps, rain, and secrets. It doesn't look like much, just a humble crossing. But as you step onto it, you hear the first sound, the low groan of wood adjusting under your weight. It's not unfriendly. It's more like the sound of an old friend getting out of a chair to greet you. The air smells of river moss and wet bark. You can hear the steady drip of water from the underside of the planks. Somewhere nearby, a frog calls out, its voice echoing under the bridge before fading into the open night. One widely accepted fact. Wooden bridges, especially in rural areas, were built with simple but enduring joinery, often without nails, relying instead on mortise and tenon connections that allowed the wood to flex with changes in humidity. This flexibility meant they could last for decades, sometimes centuries, if cared for. One lesser-known detail, in certain cultures, bridges were thought to be liminal spaces, places between worlds, where spirits could pass more easily. People might leave offerings at the base of a bridge, not to protect the bridge itself, but to keep whatever lived under it satisfied. Historians still wonder about the origins of naming rituals tied to crossings. In some traditions, Saying your name in such a place was a way of marking a passage in your life, almost like signing a contract with the landscape itself. Was it superstition, a form of local record keeping, or something older? You stop halfway across. The boards beneath you creak again, this time in a different tone, as though the bridge is shifting to listen. The village lights are behind you now, their glow caught in the mist rising from the river. Ahead is only darkness, the far bank barely visible. You lean slightly over the railing, watching the slow water below. It moves in swirls, carrying with it stray leaves and bits of pale driftwood. If the bridge really can hear your true name, you think, what would you say? Your given name? The one people call you every day? Or something deeper? The name you keep to yourself? The one that feels like it belongs to who you actually are? The boards under your feet give a small, questioning creak. You glance around. There's no one else on the bridge. The night air is still enough that even your breath seems to hang between you and the river. So very quietly you speak. The sound leaves your lips and seems to travel not just forward, but downward, into the planks, the railings, the posts driven into the riverbed. You feel, rather than hear, a faint vibration under your shoes, not sharp or sudden, just a hum, low and steady, like the bridge is filing something away in its memory. The moment passes quickly. The hum fades. The night is just a night again. From the far end of the bridge, you hear another creak, not the sound of wood shifting, but of footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming toward you. A shape emerges from the darkness. It's an old woman carrying a bundle wrapped in cloth. She nods to you as she passes, her gaze lingering for a moment as though she knows what you've just done. Then she continues on, her footsteps fading into the distance. You take the last few steps to the far bank. The ground here is soft, covered with fallen leaves. When you glance back, the bridge looks the same as it did before, but now you can't shake the feeling that it's watching you go. And somewhere, deep in its wooden bones, it knows your name. The tea house finds you before you find it. You're following the smell of something warm and comforting, something that cuts through the cool evening air like a small, invisible thread pulling you forward. It's not quite the sharpness of coffee or the sweetness of baked bread. It's deeper, earthier, the scent of leaves that have traveled a long way to end up in water. The building itself is unassuming. A low doorway framed with weathered wood, its paint faded to the color of old honey. The glass windows are fogged from the inside, blurring the glow of lantern light until it looks like the place is breathing. Above the door, a small hand-painted sign simply reads, Steam. When you step inside, you're met with a wave of heat that softens your shoulders instantly. The air is thick with the scent you followed here, an intricate mix of roasted, floral, and smoky notes. It's like stepping into a memory you didn't know you had. The room is small, the kind of small that makes you immediately lower your voice. Wooden tables with mismatched chairs are tucked into corners, and shelves along the walls hold jars filled with leaves in shades of green, brown, and almost black. Each jar has a handwritten label, some in neat script, others in quick, looping letters, as though written mid-thought. Behind the counter, the owner stands with their back to you, pouring hot water from a kettle into a clay pot. They turn as you approach, a middle-aged man with laugh lines that seem to belong to someone who spent a lot of time listening to good stories. He gestures toward an empty seat near the corner. You look like you need something for the call, he says, his voice both warm and matter-of-fact, as if diagnosing the weather's effect on you is a daily ritual. You sit, and the chair creaks in agreement. The man sets a small pot and a shallow cup in front of you. He doesn't ask what kind of tea you want. Instead, he pours. The liquid is a deep amber, steam curling upward in loose spirals. You wrap your hands around the cup, and the heat seeps in like sunlight through glass. One widely accepted fact, the man says conversationally, is that tea, as a drink, has been part of human life for at least 1,500 years. First cultivated in China, traded along roads and rivers, shared in homes and palaces alike. He pauses to pour more water over the leaves. One lesser-known detail, he continues, is that in some places, tea wasn't just a drink. It was a form of storytelling. People would meet not just to drink, but to exchange news, recite poetry, pass on tales. The leaves were only part of it. The stories were the rest. He leans back, letting the steam rise between you. Historians still wonder how many folk tales we've lost because they were never written down, just spoken over tea, passed from one listener to the next, until one day, no one remembered the words. You take a sip. The tea is smooth but complex, starting warm and ending with a faint, almost peppery bite. It feels like something you could drink for hours without realizing time has passed. The man smiles faintly at your reaction. This one's called Cloud Over River. Picked early in the season, dried over pinewood fires. My grandfather taught me how to brew it. One widely accepted fact, the man says conversationally, is that tea, as a drink, has been part of human life for at least 1,500 years. First cultivated in China, traded along roads and rivers, shared in homes and palaces alike. He pauses to pour more water over the leaves. One lesser-known detail, he continues, is that in some places, tea wasn't just a drink. It was a form of storytelling. People would meet not just to drink, but to exchange news, recite poetry, pass on tales. The leaves were only part of it. The stories were the rest. He leans back, letting the steam rise between you. Historians still wonder how many folk tales we've lost because they were never written down, just spoken over tea, passed from one listener to the next until one day, no one remembered the words. You take a sip. The tea is smooth but complex, starting warm and ending with a faint, almost peppery bite. It feels like something you could drink for hours without realizing time has passed. The man smiles faintly at your reaction. This one's called Cloud Over River. Picked early in the season, dried over pinewood fires. My grandfather taught me how to brew it. As you drink, the warmth begins to settle into you, not just in your hands, but in the space behind your eyes, in the quiet rhythm of your breathing. The man starts telling you a story without announcing that it's a story. His voice simply slips into it, like stepping off the street into a different room. It's about a woman who once owned this tea house, long before it had the name Steam. She was known for brewing tea so good that travelers would plan their entire routes to pass through here, just for a single cup. No one knew her recipe, not even her own children. She would prepare the tea in the back room alone and bring it out only when it was ready. Some people said she whispered to the tea leaves before brewing them, telling them the story of the person who would drink them. Others claimed she grew a single plant in her garden whose leaves held a flavor that could not be replicated anywhere else. The truth? The man shrugs. No one knows. She left nothing behind but this tea house and a locked cabinet in the back that no one's been able to open. The steam from your cup curls upward, and for a moment you think you can see shapes in it, faint figures, like people walking a winding road. The man notices where you're looking and grins. Ah, story smoke, he says. Some teas do that. They show you things, not what's real, but what you might remember someday. The tea is nearly gone, and the cup feels lighter in your hands. The man refills it without asking, his movements slow and deliberate. You realize that the way he pours is almost like punctuation. Each refill a pause in the conversation. Each sip a way to mark the passage of time without needing a clock. Outside, the night is deepening, but you don't feel any urgency to leave. The tea has made the air around you feel thicker, softer, as though the world outside the tea house is just a rumor. When you finally stand, the man nods to you in a way that feels like a farewell and a welcome at the same time. Come back when you need another story, he says. You step outside, and the cold air hits your face. The scent of tea clings to you like a memory that will follow you down the street, curling around you like steam that never quite fades. You see it before you realize you're looking for it. It's tucked into the far end of a narrow street where the buildings lean toward one another like old friends trading secrets. You weren't planning to turn down this street, but something about the way the evening light stretches across the cobblestones pulls you in. The air here feels different, still, almost expectant. The door waits at the very end, set into the wall of a building whose bricks have weathered into a patchwork of warm browns and soft grays. It's not the size of the door that makes it remarkable. It's only slightly taller than you, but the way it seems to hold the last of the daylight. The paint is faded, yet it glows faintly, as though the color itself remembers how it once looked and is trying to bring it back. Swirls of deep blue and gold curl across the wood in patterns you can't quite name. They look almost like flowers, almost like stars, almost like something you might have seen in a dream, but can't place. The rumors about the painted door are old. Some say it only opens for those who have dreamed of it before. Not just seen a similar door, not just imagined one, but truly dreamed of this exact door. People will swear they have never been down this street, never visited this neighborhood, but when they stand here, something in them stirs, like a memory they didn't mean to keep. The street around you is quiet. Somewhere far away, you hear the faint call of a vendor packing up their cart, the soft metallic clink of coins in a pouch. But here, there's only the door, the cool air, and that faint golden glow. One widely accepted historical fact is that painted doors like this weren't uncommon centuries ago. In certain European towns, doors were often decorated with intricate designs, not only for beauty, but as symbols of status, faith, or profession. Bakers might have wheat motifs. Sailors might have waves or anchors. The patterns served as a language for those who couldn't read signs. An entire neighborhood could be navigated by symbols alone. One lesser-known detail is that in some places, doors were painted not for those outside, but for those inside. It was believed that certain patterns could keep away bad luck, encourage prosperity, or even ward off wandering spirits who might slip into a home unnoticed. People didn't just lock their doors, they painted them like charms. Historians still wonder if the patterns on the painted door you see now mean anything specific, or if they were simply the whim of a particularly talented artist. The design has no perfect match in any known style, though some scholars claim it resembles patterns found on old navigation charts. The kind used before the compass was widely adopted. You take a step closer. The air near the door feels faintly warmer, as if it's holding on to the day's sunlight just a bit longer than the stones around it. Your fingertips brush the wood, and you feel the faint texture of brushstrokes beneath the weathering. You don't push. Instead, you close your eyes for a moment. The air smells faintly of rain, not fresh rain, but the ghost of a storm that passed hours ago. And in that moment, you have the strange sensation of being watched, not in a threatening way, but as though the door itself is aware of you. Some people say that if the painted door opens for you, it will lead you somewhere familiar, but not in this life. They say you'll step into a room you know, even if it exists in a time or place you've never visited. You lean back slightly, your hand still on the wood, feeling the faint hum of its presence. It could just be your imagination, the way your own heartbeat feels louder in your fingertips. Or it could be something else entirely. A gust of wind rolls down the street, carrying with it the faint scent of something sweet. Maybe baking bread, maybe blooming flowers you can't see. When you open your eyes again, the door's glow seems softer, like it's waiting for you to make a decision. But you don't knock. Not tonight. You step back, letting the cool air fill all your lungs, and turn to leave. The painted door stays behind you, holding its colors in the evening light, patient as stone. You have the odd feeling that it will still be there tomorrow, or in another year, or in another dream. And maybe when you've dreamed of it enough, it will be ready to open. The path you've been following slopes gently downward, the cobblestones giving way to soft earth beneath your shoes. The sound of the village fades behind you, distant chatter, the soft thud of a door closing, a cart rolling slowly home. Ahead, the air grows cooler, carrying with it the faint scent of damp stone and something almost metallic. The trees open, and there it is, the lake. It stretches wide and perfectly still, a sheet of glass catching the silver glow of the moon. The reflection is so precise that for a moment you feel like you're staring into another sky. You take a slow breath, feeling the cool dampness of the night settle across your skin. Somewhere far out in the center, just under the water's surface, you hear it. Soft, measured chimes. They are faint, as though they have traveled a long way to reach you, but the sound is clear. It's not the crisp clang of a modern bell. It's warmer, rounder, each note spreading like ripples through the air. You move closer to the edge, careful not to disturb the surface. The moonlight catches the faint shiver of a ripple, though there's no wind. Your mind reaches for explanations. Maybe there's a buoy with a small bell, maybe there's a fisherman packing up, but there's no boat, no lantern on the water, nothing but the quiet and that far-off chiming. The lake is an old one. Even without anyone telling you, you can sense it. The stones along the bank are worn smooth by centuries of water pressing against them, and the air here feels heavier, as though history has gathered in the mist. One widely accepted historical fact is that across Europe and in Asia, there are documented accounts of submerged villages, whole settlements lost to rising waters, floods, or the deliberate creation of reservoirs. In some places, when the water is calm enough, you can still see the spire of a church beneath the surface. One lesser-known detail is that bells, when submerged, do not lose their voices entirely. While water muffles and distorts sound, certain frequencies can still carry, sometimes traveling farther than they could in the open air. There are rare reports of divers hearing faint ringing from bells that have been underwater for decades. Historians still wonder if the story of this lake's bells began with a real village. Some say there was once a chapel here. It's a bell tower standing proudly in the valley before a flood swallowed it whole. Others argue that the sound has nothing to do with bells at all, that it's the lake itself shifting, releasing pockets of air that create a tone like metal being struck. You crouch at the edge, peering into the still black water. Your reflection tilts toward you, moonlight bending across your face. For just a second, you think you see the faint outline of something tall and narrow far below, perhaps a trick of the eye, perhaps the memory of a tower reaching up from the depths. The chimes sound again. 3 notes, evenly spaced. It's slow, patient, almost as if it knows you're listening. The locals, if you asked them, might tell you that the bells ring only for certain people, not as a warning or a summons, just as a sign that you were meant to hear them. They say the tone you hear can reveal your fortune, bright and clear for good luck, low and heavy for a warning, and absent altogether if the lake decides you're not ready. Tonight, the notes are warm. They settle into your chest like the comfort of a familiar voice. You close your eyes, letting the sound carry you, each chime stretching the moment a little longer. Somewhere deep inside, you feel the pull to know what lies beneath. You imagine walking the valley before it was filled with water, stone paths, a chapel door swinging in the wind, the smell of hearth smoke curling from chimneys. You picture villagers gathering on a festival day, bells ringing high above them, unaware that one day those same bells would call out from the dark water instead of the sky. You open your eyes, but the lake is just as still, the moon just as bright. The chimes fade into silence. You wait, wondering if they'll return, but the night offers only the soft rustle of reeds and the quiet lap of water against stone. Still, you have the strange sense that the bells will remember you now, just as you will remember them. And perhaps someday you'll hear them again. You don't notice the market until you're already inside it. One moment you're walking down a dim lane lined with shuttered shops, the kind where painted signs hang on squeaky hinges and the scent of the day's cooking still lingers faintly in the air. The next, you turn a corner and find yourself in a place that couldn't have fit between those buildings. And yet here it is. The night market stretches in both directions, its stalls lit with warm pools of lamplight that sway gently in the evening breeze. The air is thick with the mingled smells of roasted chestnuts, polished wood, and something faintly floral you can't quite place. The crowd moves slowly, not in the hurried push of a busy city market, but in the unhurried drifting of people who have nowhere else to be. Everyone seems calm, almost dreamlike. They step from stall to stall as if following a trail they have walked before, though you doubt they've been here any more than you have. You pause at the first table you come to. It's covered in small glass bottles, each with a cork stopper and a faded paper tag tied with string. You pick one up, and the seller, a man with a silver hair and a coat that looks too warm for the weather, smiles faintly. "Careful," he says softly, "that one might bring something back." You tilt the bottle and the faintest shimmer moves inside it, like dust motes caught in a shaft of sunlight. The tag reads simply, "First rain, age 7. You set it down gently, though you can't help but feel the weight of the memory it promises. One widely accepted historical fact is that night markets have existed in many cultures for centuries, from the lantern-lit lanes of ancient China to the bustling souks of the Middle East. They weren't just places for buying and selling, they were social gatherings, safe havens in the cooler hours where merchants and neighbors exchanged news, songs, and stories. One lesser-known detail is that some old markets weren't marked on maps at all. They were passed along by word of mouth, often appearing in places that seemed to change from week to week. People spoke of them as though they had a mind of their own, setting up shop where they were most needed or least expected. Historians still wonder whether the more mysterious markets were simply clever traveling fairs, or whether there truly were gatherings that could appear overnight without warning. Folklore certainly favors the latter, telling of places where you could find not just goods, but moments. Things you'd lost, things you'd given away, things you'd forgotten you ever had. You move deeper into the market, passing a stall where a woman sells small brass keys, each with a tag naming a place. The drawer you locked in '98, the gate at the end of your street, the chest in your grandfather's attic. Next is a table draped in deep blue cloth holding stacks of photographs. None are labeled "bud," and yet as you thumb through them, you feel an odd familiarity. You stop on one, a picture of a field under heavy gray clouds. There's nothing remarkable in it, and yet your chest tightens as though the air in the photograph is the same you once breathed. Somewhere nearby, a musician plays a tune on a small wooden flute. The melody is slow and winding, and you find yourself matching your steps to it. The sound seems to draw you toward the center of the market, where a single tent glows more brightly than the rest. Inside, there's no cellar, only a round table with a single object placed on a cushion. It's a book bound in worn leather, its cover blank. You lift it carefully, and as you do, you feel an odd rush of recognition, like remembering the name of a childhood friend after decades. When you open the book, the pages are filled, not with printed text, but with small handwritten lines. Each one is a memory. Some are yours, others are not. You read one. The smell of soup from the kitchen when you were too sick to get out of bed. You close your eyes and you're there again, warmth settling into your bones. Another line. The way she looked back once but didn't wave. That one isn't yours, or maybe it is from a part of your life you've forgotten. You place the book back on the cushion, your hands strangely reluctant to let it go. The market hums softly outside, the sound of footsteps and low conversation mingling with the faint chime of a bell from somewhere deeper within. You step back into the lamplight. The crowd seems thinner now. A few stalls have begun packing up, folding their cloths and wrapping their goods in paper. The scent of roasted chestnuts fades, replaced by the cool, damp air of a night turning toward morning. You glance back down the lane, but the market already feels lighter, as though it might slip away entirely if you blink too long. And maybe it will, because in places like this, you rarely get to choose when you arrive, and you never get to choose when you leave. The lane narrows until the stone walls almost brush your shoulders. It's the sort of street you'd pass by in daylight without noticing, just another shadowed slit between taller buildings. But tonight it's warm here. A faint golden glow spills from somewhere ahead, along with the low, steady scrape of wood against wood. You follow the sound, your steps soft on the worn flagstones. The glow resolves into a doorway, its frame low and a little uneven, as though it has settled over decades. Inside, the air smells faintly of lanolin and cedar, with a trace of something floral, like lavender dried long ago. The shop is small, just enough room for a loom, a low bench, and shelves stacked high with folded cloth. The light comes from an oil lamp on a table, its flame making slow shadows dance across the walls. And in the center of it all, there she is, the weaver. Her hands move steadily, drawing the shuttle back and forth with a rhythm so even you find yourself breathing to match it. She doesn't look up at first, but there's no coldness in it, only the focus of someone whose whole attention belongs to the work in front of her. When she does glance up, her eyes catch the lamplight in a way that makes you feel she knows exactly how long you've been standing there. She smiles faintly, then turns back to the loom. From where you stand, you can see the tapestry she's making. It's a deep, rich blue at the base, fading upward into pale gold threads, the colors blending as smoothly as the sky at dawn. There are shapes within it, not quite figures, not quite patterns, just enough suggestion to make your mind reach for recognition. You look away for a moment, then back again, and you're certain something in the weaving has shifted. It could be a trick of the light. It could be the way the threads catch the shadows, or it could be that the woven lines have changed very slightly, as though the cloth itself had taken a breath. One widely accepted historical fact is that weaving has existed for over 1,000 years, with early looms found in ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, and China. Entire economies once revolved around the skill of turning thread into fabric, with some weavers working under royal patronage to create tapestries that told stories of kingdoms and battles. One lesser-known detail is that in parts of medieval Europe, it was believed certain weavers could trap moments into cloth, not just images, but sensations. People spoke of blankets that kept you as warm as the day they were made, or wall hangings that seemed to hold the sound of rain falling outside the workshop when they were woven. Historians still wonder whether these tales were simply poetic metaphors for quality craftsmanship, or if the idea of a living weave carried older, stranger roots, possibly tied to the belief that threads could connect people's fates. You step closer and the weaver gestures to a chair. It's low and sturdy, the kind of seat you could forget yourself in. From here, you can see the way her fingers move, not hurried, but certain, each gesture practiced until it no longer needs thought. The sound of the loom fills the room, a gentle, repeating thok-thok, followed by the quiet sigh of thread being drawn into place. It's hypnotic. Your eyes drift to the shelves where other tapestries rest folded, their edges just visible. One shows a scattering of leaves across a field of deep red. Another depicts waves breakbang, the foam so finely woven you can almost feel the spray. And another, half covered, seems to show a road lined with trees, their branches bare under a winter sky. The weaver catches you looking. Her voice is soft when she speaks. Some are for warmth, she says. Some are for stories. Some are for keeping things. You ask her what she means, but she only tilts her head toward the loom, the threads crossing under her hands. The pattern grows. It's not an image you recognize, but it feels like something you have seen before or maybe dreamed. The threads seem to shift again, just a little, like the movement of breath under a blanket. You lean closer, wondering if it's your eyes playing tricks on you. The weaver notices, and the faintest smile curves her lips. She doesn't explain. Outside, the night deepens. Somewhere far off, you hear the muffled sound of a cart rolling over cobblestones. But in here, time feels held in place, the steady rhythm of the loom drawing each moment carefully into the cloth. When you finally stand, the weaver nods once, as if you've both agreed on something without words. You step out into the lane, the warm light fading behind you. The street feels cooler now, and you can't quite shake the sense that a fragment of your own story is somewhere in her folded tapestries, resting on a shelf, waiting. Just ahead, set into the pool of a building that doesn't seem to have any doors, is a staircase. Stone, narrow, worn in the middle from centuries of feet. It curves upward in a slow spiral, except the spiral doesn't lead anywhere. You take a few steps closer. The stair begins in the shadowed mouth of an archway, but there's no railing, no balustrade, just the wide, bare curve of stone climbing against the wall. You crane your neck, following it with your eyes, and feel your brow crease. About 12 feet above the ground, it simply ends. No platform, no doorway, not even the suggestion of a landing. The last step just juts into empty air, as though the builder had walked away in the middle of a ball and never returned. The air here smells faintly of damp earth and lichen, like an old cellar. You run your hand over the wall beside the first step. The stone is cool, and small patches of moss cling to its surface. One widely accepted historical fact is that there are real staircases to nowhere, scattered across the world. Some were remnants of buildings that were never finished. Others were left behind when the structures they served were demolished. You'll find them in castles, churches, even old factories. Stone or wood steps leading up into nothingness, like forgotten punctuation in the middle of a sentence. One lesser-known detail is that in some rural towns of the 18th and 19th and 19th centuries, masons would intentionally build half stairs as charms against spirits, believing that if a ghost tried to chase someone up the steps, it would get confused when the path abruptly ended and simply vanish. Historians still wonder about the more elaborate examples, staircases with ornate carvings, perfect craftsmanship, and no apparent purpose, especially when they stand alone, with no rubble or framework to hint at a missing building. Were they truly abandoned construction, or did they once connect to something no longer in our world? You set your foot on the first step. It's wider than you expected, and your shoe makes the faintest scuff against the worn surface. You climb slowly, trailing your fingers against the wall, the curve pulling you upward. Halfway up, you pause. The silence feels heavier here, like you've stepped into a pocket of air that doesn't quite belong to the rest of the street. From this angle, you can see a faint groove in the wall, running parallel to the stair. It might once have been the edge of another structure, a floor, a balcony, but it's so faint that you could just as easily mistake it for the mark of an old scaffold. You take another step, then another. The wall is lighter now, touched by what little moonlight slips between the rooftops above. When you reach the final intact step, you stop. It's solid underneath your feet, but your toes hang close to open air. Beyond this point is nothing but the cool, dark void between buildings. If you reached forward, your fingers might graze the edge of the opposite wall, but you're not entirely sure. The city looks different from here. You can see a chimney line you hadn't noticed before, the faint outline of weathered tiles, and far below, the narrow silver gleam of a gutter full of rainwater. You glance down at the steps you just climbed, and for a moment they seem longer than they should be, stretching back into shadow, each one slightly steeper than you remember. A breeze moves through, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and something sweeter, maybe baking bread, though it's late for that. You stand there longer than you mean to. There's something oddly comfortable about this precarious spot, like sitting on the edge of a bed before you lie down, letting the day slow to a halt. Finally, you turn, carefully stepping back down. The silence lifts a little with each step, as though you're leaving the still pocket behind. At the bottom, you glance up one last time. From here, the final step looks too far to reach, and yet you just stood on it. You step back into the alley, the sound of your footsteps slowly returning. Behind you, the staircase waits, rising toward nothing in particular, and yet somehow toward something. The park feels different at night. It isn't that the paths are unfamiliar. You've walked them before, winding between benches and old lampposts. It's just that the air here holds its own kind of quiet, not the heavy absolute kind that feels empty, but the sort that seems to be listening. The moon is low and pale, spilling soft light across the trimmed grass and the cracked edges of the walkway. The lamps give off a faint golden haze, their glass smudged from years of moths pressing against them. You can hear the faint splash of the fountain at the far end, but tonight you're walking toward the center of the park, toward the tree. You see it before you reach it. Even among the other old trees here, the oaks, the maples, the ones planted as saplings decades ago, this one stands apart. Its trunk is thick, broad enough that four people holding hands might not be able to wrap all the way around it. The bark is textured like waves frozen in mid-crest, ridged and curling, with deep grooves where moss has taken root. But it isn't the size or the shape that draws you in. It's the sound. At first, it's faint, so soft you might think it's just the wind threading through the branches. But as you step closer, you realize it's steady, continuous, and impossibly deliberate. It's a melody, not the kind you'd hear in a concert hall. This one is older, slower, and warmer, like someone humming to themselves while they work. The notes drift from the hollow in the trunk, each one carrying a vibration you can almost feel in your chest. You pause a few feet away. The melody changes, not by much, but enough that it feels like the tree has noticed you. The branches sway slightly, though the rest of the park is still. One widely accepted historical fact is that trees can produce sound, not just the rustle of leaves or the creak of branches, but actual tones caused by wind moving through hollows, or by vibrations traveling through the wood. Some old trees have been known to resonate like natural instruments. One lesser-known detail is that there are documented cases of certain tree species producing sounds far below human hearing range. Deep vibrations that can be felt more than heard, often caused by water moving within the trunk. Some researchers believe these vibrations may be part of how trees communicate with each other. Historians still wonder whether the legends of singing trees, found in stories from Europe, Asia, and the Americas, began with real natural phenomena, or if they were born entirely from imagination. Were these tales poetic metaphors, or observations of rare musical accidents in nature? You take another step forward, placing your hand lightly on the trunk. The wood is warm, not from sunlight. There hasn't been much of that today, but with a slow, even heat that feels alive in a way you can't quite explain. The hum deepens, and for just a second, you recognize part of the melody. You can't place it, but it stirs something in you, the way a forgotten childhood song might rise uninvited in your mind. The hollow itself is a dark oval, about the height of your chest. You lean slightly toward it, listening. The sound isn't coming from deep inside, but from somewhere within the very fibers of the wood. You step around the tree, noticing that the song sounds slightly different from each side, higher near one knot, softer near a patch of moss. You imagine what it would be like to sit here all night, just listening, letting the notes spill into dreams. A breeze brushes past, carrying the faint smell of damp leaves and earth. The branches sway again, and the melody shifts once more. It's slower now, almost like a lullaby. You close your eyes, letting the sound settle in your chest, and for a moment you feel the world outside the park dissolve. The lamps, the path, the city beyond, all of it fades until there's just you, the tree, and the low, steady hum of a song older than memory. When you finally open your eyes, the melody is fading, though the warmth under your palm remains. You take a step back. The tree is silent now, its branches still. But you have the strange, certain feeling that if you return, maybe tomorrow night, maybe years from now, it will remember the song you heard, and it will sing to you again. The alley is dim, but not quite dark. You can see where the lamplight ends, leaving a patch of wall caught between shadow and glow. The bricks there are worn, their surface softened by years of rain and the passing of hands. There's someone standing just a few paces ahead, facing that wall. An older man with a long coat that sways slightly as he moves. His hair is pulled back into a short tail, and in front of him sits a low table. On it, a single candle burns. The flame flickers, sending soft light dancing across the uneven bricks. And then, without a word, he lifts his hands. The first shape appears. At first, it's nothing special. A simple bird, wings flapping in slow arcs. But then the wings fold, the bird perches, and its head tilts with a movement so fluid that you almost forget it's only a shadow. The performer changes shape again, and this time the silhouette is of a running dog, lean and fast, its legs moving in a perfect rhythm. Then the dog becomes a horse, then a rabbit, then something you can't quite name, a creature that feels half real, half invented. You take a step closer, the ground beneath you uneven with loose stones. The candlelight smells faintly of beeswax, and you can hear the faint scratch of the man's sleeve against his coat as he bones. One widely accepted historical fact is that shadow play, the art of casting shapes on a surface using hands, figures, or puppets, is one of the oldest forms of storytelling in the world. It has roots stretching back more than 2,000 years, with recorded traditions in China, India, and throughout Southeast Asia. One lesser-known detail is that in some small villages, shadow plays were once used as a kind of traveling news broadcast. Performers would act out local events, dramatizing them through puppets and silhouettes, blending fact and fiction so skillfully that audiences might remember the story more vividly than the reality. Historians still wonder about the earliest origins of shadow play. Was it born from simple hand games around the fire, or did it emerge from a deeper ritual, a way to speak to gods, spirits, or ancestors through flickering shapes? The man shifts position, and the wall fills with the outline of a boat drifting across waves. The boat rocks gently, and in it sits a figure wearing a wide hat. As the candle flickers, The boat seems to rise and fall, and the figure appears to lift a hand in greeting. To you, you blink. The gesture was so deliberate, so natural that you almost returned it. Another figure joins the first, smaller but moving with the same smooth, controlled grace. They speak to each other, or at least they appear to. You can't hear a word, yet the rhythm of their gestures and the tilt of their heads make the conversation feel complete. The wall, just a moment ago a blank surface, is now a stage. The candle burns steadily, its light warm and constant, and you realize the performer is not only shaping the shadows with his hands. There are small, carved figures too, lying on the table, which he picks up and sets down with practiced ease. Some are animals, some human, some so strange you're not sure what to call them. He moves quickly now, the shapes blending one into the next. A galloping horse becomes a leaping deer. A deer becomes a tree. The tree becomes a house. And then suddenly the house sprouts wings and takes flight into an open sky. You find yourself leaning forward without realizing it, as though your closeness might let you step inside the scene. The story he tells is silent, but your mind supplies the sound. The rush of wind, the creak of wood, the call of unseen voices. You wonder if everyone sees the same tale, or if the shadows shift slightly for each person, reshaping themselves to fit the listener's own memories. A breeze slips through the alley, and the candle flame trembles. The shadows ripple, bending and stretching until they melt back into the wall. The performer lowers his hands and glances toward you. His eyes catch the light just enough to show a flicker of something. Amusement, maybe, or the quiet satisfaction of someone who knows their work has landed exactly where it should. Without speaking, he picks up the candle, and the light follows him as he turns and walks away. His shadow stretches long across the ground, flickering with each step. The wall is bare again. You stand there a moment longer, staring at the bricks, as if some trace of the story might still be hiding in their cracks. But there's nothing. Only the faint smell of wax and the quiet memory of shapes that moved more vividly than the flame that made them. The sound comes first, a single note, low, resonant, and impossibly clear, rolling through the air like a ripple through still water. You feel it in your chest before you even know where it's coming from. Then you see it. The tower rises above the rooftops, its shadow stretching long across the cobblestones. It's taller than you remembered, or maybe it only looks that way because the sky behind it is already turning the deep indigo of evening. The clock face glows faintly, the brass hands catching the last light of the day. You pause in the street. It's not the hour, not even close. You glance at your watch, then back up at the tower. The single chime shouldn't have happened, yet here it is, hanging in the air as if it might echo forever. The sound fades slowly, as though reluctant to leave. Around you, a few people have also stopped. Some look up, some simply keep walking, their pace unchanged, though a flicker of a smile, not a happy smile, but something quieter, tighter, passes across their faces. It's the same smile on all of them. You take a step closer. The tower's base is of weathered stone, dark with age, its corners softened by centuries of wind and rain. Above that, the brick rises clean and straight, each layer stacked with the kind of precision you don't see much anymore. Narrow windows punctuate the height, some with shutters, some with panes of glass that catch the fading light like coins at the bottom of a fountain. And at the very top, just beneath the clock face, you can make out the silhouette of the bell. One widely accepted historical fact is that mechanical clock towers have been part of city life since the 14th century in Europe, serving as public timekeepers in an age when few people owned personal watches or clocks. One lesser-known detail is that in certain towns, the clock towers were also used to signal things beyond the time: a storm approaching, a fire in the market, the arrival of important travelers. The number and rhythm of the chimes could carry hidden meanings known only to locals. Historians still wonder how many of those codes have been lost. Could a stray chime, long after the tradition has faded, still be sending a message that no one living remembers how to read? You keep walking, your shoes tapping against the stones. The air smells faintly of iron, maybe from the bell, maybe from the rain earlier in the day. There's a door at the base of the tower. It's painted green, though the color has faded into something more like the hue of old moss. The paint is peeling, curling away at the edges to reveal the gray wood beneath. You try the handle. It turns. The hinges sigh as you push the door inward, and the scent of dust greets you, dry and fine, like the pages of a book left open too long. The interior is dim, lit only by narrow slits of windows that let in vertical slices of gold. The staircase begins immediately, a spiral of stone that curves up into shadow. You climb, your hand slides along the iron rail, worn smooth where countless others have held it. The steps are shallow but narrow, forcing your feet to angle slightly with each one. As you ascend, the air grows cooler, the faint smell of metal mixing with the scent of old rope and wood. Halfway up, you hear it, a faint ticking. It's not the loud, echoing tick you'd expect from a tower this size. It's quiet, steady, almost shy. You follow it round and round until the steps end at a wooden platform. The room above the platform is larger than you expected, the ceiling high, the beams thick. Gears the size of cartwheels turn slowly, teeth clicking into place with each movement. Chains hang down in heavy loops, their links darkened with age. In the center, the mechanism that drives the hands of the clock moves with unhurried certainty. You look up at the bell. It's massive, dark bronze, mottled with green where rain has kissed it through the years. A thick rope trails from its clapper, vanishing through a pulley toward the mechanism. You place your hand on the rope. It's rough, the fibers catching slightly on your skin. A breeze slips through one of the narrow windows, carrying the distant sound of the street below. And then, faint almost like a breath, you hear another chime. Not the deep ringing one from before. This is softer, shorter, like a note played for someone who's already inside. You freeze, your hand still on the rope. The sound doesn't come again. But when you glance down through the window, you notice the people in the street moving differently now. Some are crossing to the other side. Some are lingering under awnings. And all of them are still wearing that same small, knowing smile. The sky outside is darker now. The first stars are appearing dim and pale above the rooftops. You take one last look at the bell, the ropes, the gears. Then you begin your descent, the steps creaking faintly under your weight. At the bottom, you step back out into the street. The tower stands behind you, tall and unmoving, its clock face calm in the evening light. You wait just for a moment to see if it will chime again. It doesn't, but you walk away with the strange certainty that the next time it does, you'll hear it, no matter where you are. It starts with just one pair. At first, you think nothing of it, a pair of plain brown leather shoes sitting neatly side by side on the cobblestone, as though their owner had stepped out of them for a moment and might return at any second. But then you take another step, and there's another pair, and then another, all the way down the lane, evenly spaced like a strange, silent parade frozen in mid-step. The shoes wait. Some are polished to a soft shine, their laces tied in tidy bows. Some are scuffed and worn, the leather softened into creases like old smiles. A few are small, children's shoes, their toes slightly pointed inward, as if they'd been placed with care. There are no coats, no hats, no signs of where their owners might be. Just shoes. You pause, listening. The street is unusually quiet. No footsteps, no chatter from open windows. The air is cool and dry, carrying the faint scent of stone warmed earlier by the sun. A pigeon watches from a nearby gutter, tilting its head toward the lane as though it, too, is curious. One widely accepted historical fact is that in many ancient cultures, shoes were considered deeply personal items, symbols of status, identity, and even spiritual protection. To leave them behind was not something done lightly. One lesser-known detail is that in certain 19th century European port towns, a pair of shoes left neatly in public could be a coded message, a farewell to the sea, a sign someone had chosen to leave the sailor's life forever. Historians still wonder if that tradition quietly migrated inland and transformed, becoming something else entirely, a wordless ritual no one remembers inventing. You step closer to one pair, black leather boots, well cared for, with small metal buckles that catch the faint light. The cobblestones beneath them are dry. Dust gathers at the edges of the soles, as though they've been here for hours, maybe days. A breeze moves through the lane, barely enough to stir your hair. The shoes don't shift. Your own footsteps sound louder now as you continue. Each pair you pass seems to have a presence, a weight, as if they are not simply objects, but placeholders for something invisible. Halfway down, you spot a pair of shoes that don't match. One is a deep brown Oxford, the other a pale canvas slip-on. They're placed together anyway, as if whoever arranged them either didn't notice or didn't care. It's easy to imagine a story here. Two strangers leaving at the same moment, their steps in sync just long enough for their shoes to be left side by side. You stop at a particularly small pair, white children's sneakers, the fabric worn soft, the soles marked with faint traces of chalk dust. You imagine the games they might have played in the square nearby. Your eyes wander upward. The windows above the lane are shuttered, their paint flaking. Curtains twitch once, then still again. You're not sure if someone moved them or if it was just the wind. At the far end of the lane, there's a small archway. You can see another street beyond it, brighter and busier, the sound of distant voices drifting toward you. You glance back one last time. The shoes are still there, lined up in their quiet procession, as if waiting for some signal. You wonder if you'll ever know what that signal is. You smell it before you see it, that soft, unmistakable scent, the one that drifts through the air after a summer storm when raindrops have just touched warm earth. The scent that feels cool and warm at the same time, carrying both freshness and memory. But it's not raining. The sky above the rooftops is pale blue, fading toward evening. The cobblestones are drenched, and yet the smell is here, crisp, earthy, threaded through with something warm and yeasty. It's coming from the small shop on the corner. The bakery looks older than the buildings around it, its bricks uneven and darkened in patches as if they've been through 100 winters. The sign above the door is painted in looping, hand-lettered script, the kind that makes you think the person who made it didn't rush. Through the front window, you can see a display of golden loaves, their crusts a deep amber, dusted with flour. One round loaf sits in the center, slightly cracked on top, as though it's exhaling. You push the door open. A small brass bell jingles overhead, the sound short and light. The air inside is warm, not the heavy warmth of a summer room, but the kind that wraps around you the way a blanket does when it's just come out of the dryer. The scent of rain is stronger now. It's woven into the smell of baking bread, so naturally that you almost believe it's just your imagination connecting the two. You take a deeper breath, and for a second, you're standing on a porch in your childhood, watching rain streak down the glass, the world outside hushed. The counter is small, made of dark wood polished smooth with age. Behind it stands the baker, an older man with sleeves rolled to his elbows, his hands dusted with flour. His hair is the soft silver of clouds about to break open, and his eyes are the gray blue of a puddle under sunlight. "Evening," he says, and his voice has the same calm weight as the smell in the air. You glance at the shelves behind him. Baguettes lean against each other like old friends, their crusts scored with neat diagonal cuts. Round loaves sit cooling on racks. A basket holds rolls so light they look like they could float if given the chance. One widely accepted historical fact is that the earthy scent after rain, known as petrichor, comes from oils released by plants and a chemical called geosmin, produced by soil-dwelling bacteria. When rain hits the ground, tiny air bubbles carry the scent upward. One lesser-known detail is that geosmin is so potent that humans can detect it at concentrations as low as 5 parts per trillion, meaning we're wired to notice it even if we can't explain why it matters. Historians still wonder if ancient bakers ever tried to capture that scent on purpose, using herbs, fermentation, or even rainwater in their dough, a tradition that may have quietly vanished, or perhaps survived in secret. You ask him how the bread smells like this. He smiles, but it's not the kind of smile that gives anything away. It's the kind that says, "I know something you don't, and I'm fine keeping it that way." Some things, he says, taste better if you don't know why. He slides a loaf toward you. It's still warm, the crust crisp under your fingertips. When you bring it closer, the scent of rain blooms, full and soft, as though the loaf has captured a small storm and is holding it just for you. You step outside again, the bell giving its quick farewell behind you. The evening air feels different now, warmer, heavier, as though the world might rain after all. You tear off a piece of bread, the crust crackles faintly, and the steam that escapes smells exactly like the first drops hitting dusty ground. And for a moment, you're sure you can taste the weather. You first notice the sound when the path bends toward the water. It's not the usual sound of a river, not the tumbling, impatient rush you hear in mountain streams, nor the chaotic slap of waves against a rocky shore. This one moves slowly, with the steady confidence of something that has been here far longer than the road, the trees, or even the town. The air changes as you approach. The coolness from the water wraps around you, softening the warmth of the afternoon. There's a faint smell of wet stone mixed with the green scent of moss and leaves. The path is dappled with light that filters through branches, flickering with the same gentle rhythm as the ripples ahead. The river itself is wide, its surface smooth enough that you can see the sky reflected in it. The clouds drift slowly overhead, their shapes stretching and bending with the current. Every so often, a leaf floats past, spinning lazily before disappearing around a bend. You step closer to the edge. That's when you hear it, or think you do. Beneath the gentle lap of water against the bank, there's a softer sound, a murmur almost too faint to catch, like someone speaking just out of reach. It's not the chatter of people nearby, and it's not the wind moving through the reeds. This sound seems to come from inside the water itself. You lean forward, resting your hands on your knees. The words aren't clear, just a cadence, a rise and fall, like the rhythm of a conversation. It's the kind of sound that makes you feel as if you've interrupted something private, but the river doesn't seem to mind. One widely accepted historical fact is that rivers have been vital to human life for thousands of years, not just for drinking water and travel, but as places where communities gathered, stories were told, and traditions passed down. Entire cultures have been shaped by the flow of a single waterway. One lesser-known detail is that some folklore suggests rivers remember events that happen along their banks, that the water, constantly moving yet always connected, carries whispers of the past downstream, mingling them with the present. Historians still wonder if this belief began as a poetic metaphor, or if ancient listeners truly thought they could hear voices of the past in the currents. The bank where you stand is worn smooth, as if many people have paused here before you, leaning in to listen. A smooth gray stone sits nearby, half in the water, half in the air. You sit on it, letting your shoes rest just above the surface. The murmur continues. At times it's almost words, syllables you nearly recognize before they dissolve again into the shifting sound. You imagine the river holding centuries of conversations, lovers whispering to each other in the quiet of early morning, merchants haggling over the price of fish, children laughing as they skip stones, a lone traveler asking the way to the next village. The river doesn't seem to choose which memories to keep. It carries them all, joyful, shine, mundane, with the same steady patience. Far downstream, you spot the dark shape of a bridge, its wooden posts sunk deep into the water. The current swirls a little as it passes beneath. You wonder how many times people have leaned on its railing, speaking their hopes into the air, never knowing the river was listening. A dragonfly hovers above the surface, its wings glinting like tiny panes of stained glass. Somewhere behind you, a bird calls, the sound sharp and bright before fading again into the hum of water. You lean forward once more, letting your fingertips graze the cool surface. The moment your skin touches it, the murmur changes, not louder, but closer, as though the river has noticed you and is deciding what to tell. You stay there for a long time, waiting, listening, and though you never make out the exact words, you have the distinct feeling that the river knows something about you too. The path into the hills begins just beyond the last row of houses. You leave the cobblestone street behind and step onto a dirt trail, narrow enough that the grass brushes your ankles. The air feels different here, cleaner, quieter, touched by a steady breeze that carries the scent of pine and cool stone. The sky is soft with the light of early evening, that gentle in-between hour when the world hasn't yet decided if it's day or night. The hills ahead are dark with trees, their tops swaying gently. But what catches your eye isn't the forest. It's the light. A row of lanterns stretches along the ridge, evenly spaced, each one glowing with a warm, steady golden hue. From here, they look like a necklace of small suns, hanging just above the treetops. The light is soft but constant, and unlike the flicker of firelight, it doesn't shift or waver. The trail climbs gently at first, winding between clusters of tall grass and the occasional wildflower nodding in the wind. Every now and then, you glance up to see the lantern still there, unmoving, as though waiting for you. When you reach the tree line, the air cools further. The scent of pine sharpens, mixing with the earthy smell of soil. Shadows deepen here, but the lanterns above cut through them easily, each one casting a small circle of light on the path beneath it. They're larger than you expected, about the height of your chest, made from weathered bronze and thick panes of glass. The metal frames are etched with intricate patterns of flowers, vines, and swirling clouds. The designs catch the light in a way that makes them seem almost alive, as if they're breathing slowly. Inside each lantern is nothing. No candle, no oil, no coil of modern wiring. Just a steady, golden glow suspended in the air, like a drop of sunlight captured and held in place. You pause to watch one closely. The light doesn't flicker. It doesn't dim. It simply is. One widely accepted historical fact is that certain ancient civilizations, like the Romans, created oil lamps that could burn for remarkably long periods using special wicks and fuel mixtures. Some were said to last for months without being refilled. One lesser-known detail is the legend of the eternal flames found in old temples and shrines around the world. In some cases, these were natural gas seeps ignited long ago and still burning today. In others, the source of the light remains unexplained, the knowledge of its creation lost with the builders. Historians still wonder if the lanterns in these hills were crafted by human hands using a forgotten technique, or if the light is something far older, something the makers merely learned to hold. The path winds along the ridge now, the lanterns leading you onward. From here, the land below rolls away in soft shapes, fields and villages glowing faintly in the distance. The sky above deepens into a rich indigo, and the first stars appear. As you walk, you notice each lantern is slightly different. One's glass is tinted with the faintest green, another etched with the outline of a bird in flight. Some show signs of age, a patina on the metal, a hairline crack in the glass. But the light inside remains untouched, as perfect as the day it began. You reach out to touch one. The metal is cool, not warm, as you'd expect from something glowing so brightly. Your fingertips leave no smudge on the glass. Somewhere in the trees, a nightbird calls. The breeze carries the sound away, leaving you with only the steady presence of the light. You keep walking. The lanterns stretch farther than you thought, disappearing into the dark folds of the hills. You wonder how many there are. Dozens? Hundreds? And you wonder, too, if anyone tends them, or if they simply do not need tending at all. The tree finds you before you find it. That's the only way you can explain it. The path through the forest is not one you plan to take. You are following the soft crunch of leaves beneath your shoes, the shifting light through the branches, and the faint scent of damp earth after a recent rain. And then, there it is, an ancient oak, older than the road you came in on, older perhaps than the town itself. Its trunk is impossibly wide, the bark deeply grooved like the wrinkles on a face that has smiled for centuries. Roots as thick as your leg twist and curl out from the base, stretching across the soil before plunging deep again. It's here, among those roots, that you see it, a door. It's not large. In fact, you'd have to stoop low to fit through it. The frame is round at the top, like the shape of a keyhole, and it's set directly into the base of the trunk. The wood of the door is darker than the oak's bark, worn smooth with age and bound with narrow iron bands. A small handle, no bigger than your thumb, gleams faintly in the filtered light. You kneel, brushing away a scatter of leaves. The door fits so neatly between the roots that it looks as though the tree grew around it on purpose, cradling it, keeping it safe. You half expect it to be painted, bright red or green, the way storybook doors sometimes are. But no, its beauty is in its quietness. The grain runs in gentle arcs, the metal is free of rust, and there's a faint scent of resin, as if the tree is still watching over it. One widely accepted historical fact is that in many cultures, trees were seen as gateways between worlds, living bridges between the underworld, the earth, and the sky. The Norse spoke of Yggdrasil, the great tree that connected all realms. One lesser-known detail is that in parts of rural Ireland and Scotland, small fairy doors were sometimes built into the base of trees as offerings or to appease the spirits believed to live within. These doors were not meant for humans to enter, but as invitations or warnings to something else entirely. Historians still wonder if these practices began as religious rituals, as children's amusements, or as something in between, a way to blend play and reverence into a single act. You run your fingers over the handle. It's warm, surprisingly so, given the cool shade here. There's a stillness in the air now, as if the forest is holding its breath. Even the birdsong seems to have paused. You listen. For a moment, you think you hear movement on the other side. Not footsteps exactly, more like the faint shuffling of fabric or the creak of something wooden. It's impossible to tell if it's close or far away. The door doesn't seem locked. You could open it, but instead you sit back on your heels, studying it. Around the frame, tiny carvings mark the wood, so small you almost miss them. Spirals, leaves, shapes that might be stars or eyes. They're shallow, like they were made with a very fine tool. You glance up. The oak's branches stretch high, catching bits of sunlight. In the breeze, they sway gently, but the door stays perfectly still. You wonder how many people have stood where you are now, staring at it, wondering the same things. Who made it? Why here? And what happens if you step inside? Somewhere in the distance, a twig snaps. You look over your shoulder, but the forest is empty. When you turn back, you swear the handle has shifted. Just a fraction, as though it's waiting for you to decide. You reach out and stop. The air smells faintly of something sweet now, like honey warmed in the sun. A memory stirs, a summer from long ago, a picnic near the woods, someone laughing. You can't place it, but it's enough to make your chest ache. The door remains closed, and for now, so do you. The first thing you notice is the stillness. Not the kind of stillness that comes late at night, when the world is meant to be quiet, but a midday stillness. Unexpected, unsettling, yet somehow gentle. You're walking along a sunlit lane when it happens. One moment, the village hums softly with life. Footsteps on stone, the low murmur of conversation, the creak of cartwheels. And then, nothing. It's exactly noon. Shadows sit directly beneath their owners. The air is warm and heavy with the smell of fresh bread from the bakery, mixed with the faint floral scent of potted geraniums on windowsills. The sky is the pale, washed-out blue of early summer, but no one moves. On one side of the street, a shopkeeper sits in a wooden chair just inside his doorway, head tilted back, eyes closed. Across the lane, two children who had been tossing a cloth ball now stand side by side, hands resting loosely at their sides, breathing slow and even. A cat lies curled in a patch of sunlight, chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm. It's not sleep as you know it. It's more like the entire village has been lulled into the same quiet dream. You step carefully, your footsteps sounding too loud. The stone beneath your shoes is warm, the kind of heat that has been gathering all morning. Somewhere a bell rings once, and the sound seems to echo longer than it should, fading into the corners of the stillness. You pause beside a water fountain, its basin full of clear, rippling water. The stream from its spout falls in a silver thread, but somehow you can't hear the splash. The silence is so complete, it feels as though sound has been gently folded away. One widely accepted historical fact is that in some parts of the world, midday rest has long been a tradition. From the siesta in Spain to similar customs in parts of Italy, Greece, and Latin America. These pauses in the day were meant to give people relief from the hottest hours, letting life slow down before resuming. One lesser-known detail is that in certain remote villages, this daily rest was once so strictly observed that even travelers were expected to join in. Shops would close, roads would empty, and no business, not even the smallest transaction, could be done until the appointed hour had passed. Historians still wonder whether traditions like this began purely as a practical response to climate, or if they also carried spiritual meaning, a shared moment when an entire community turned inward as if resetting itself. You move on, peeking through an open window. Inside, a family sits around a table, plates of food half finished. Their hands rest loosely on the table, their faces calm, like statues mid-conversation. A fly hovers lazily in the sunlight, its wings moving slow enough that you can almost count the beats. Your shadow stretches beside you as you walk toward the center of town. Here, the buildings form a small square around a fountain with a carved stone figure in its center. The figure is of a woman holding a sheaf of wheat in one arm and a small clock in the other. The clock's hands are frozen at 12. You find a bench and sit. The wood is warm beneath you, and the air hums faintly with the heat. For a moment, you imagine joining them, closing your eyes, letting the stillness take you. What would it feel like? Would you wake with the same memory of where you left off? Or would you dream something that belongs only to this hour? The bell rings again. The sound is sharper now, brighter. And just like that, the village exhales, eyes blink open. The shopkeeper shifts in his chair. The children pick up their ball and toss it once more. The fountain's splash returns to your ears as though someone turned the volume back up. No one speaks of it. No one seems surprised. You stand, brushing the dust from your hands. The village hums back to life, but you can't shake the feeling that you've witnessed something rare. Not just a tradition, but a secret rhythm, one the outside world has long forgotten. You don't realize the path is leading you here until you've already arrived. The lane narrows, the house is thin, and the cobblestones grow uneven beneath your feet. A breeze carries the faint smell of damp stone and something green, moss perhaps, or ivy warmed by the afternoon sun. Beyond the last cottage, the world opens into a small clearing at the edge of the village. And there it is, a well. It stands alone, framed by a low ring of ancient stones, their surfaces worn smooth by centuries of hands leaning in. The stones are mottled with lichen, flecks of gray and soft green. A wooden roof shelters the opening, its beams darkened with age, and the pulley creaks faintly in the wind. You step closer. The well is deeper than you expect. Leaning over, you see only darkness at first, a darkness so combined it feels like falling just to look at it. Then slowly, a shape forms, not the rough sides of stone, but a circle of shimmering light far below. It's water, still water, and in it, something moves. It's not your face, though you expect to see it. The reflection in the water is faint, hazy, as though you're looking through someone else's eyes. A field stretches out under a pale sky. A figure walks there, carrying something in their arms. You can't quite make out the details. The edges blur as if the water doesn't want to give away too much. The wind shifts, and the image fades back to darkness. One widely accepted historical fact is that wells have long been more than just sources of water. In many cultures, they were places of gathering, of storytelling, of quiet magic. Some ancient Greek and Roman wells were dedicated to gods or spirits, with offerings dropped into the water for luck or blessings. One lesser-known detail is that in certain rural parts of England and Wales, wishing wells were said to sometimes show visions in their surface, not of the future but of the past, especially events tied to the land itself. People would lean over, close one eye, and wait for the water to still completely before the images appeared. Historians still wonder whether such visions were simply tricks of light and mind, or if these wells held some forgotten role as keepers of communal memory, storing the echoes of moments long gone. You rest your hands on the edge of the stone. The surface is cool even in the sun. Somewhere below, the pulley rope sways lightly, though no one has touched it. The air here feels older. Not heavy exactly, but layered, as though each breath you take is brushed by the lives of everyone who has ever stood in this spot. You close your eyes. The breeze cools your cheeks. When you look again, the water has changed. It's not the field this time. It's a street. Not the one you walked to get here, but a street that feels familiar in a way you can't explain. It's lined with houses you think you might have dreamed of once, though you have never visited them. A door swings open in one. Someone steps out. You try to see their face, but the ripples in the water hide it. Your own reflection never appears. You could drop the bucket in, draw the water up, see if it feels different. But something about the stillness makes you hesitate. Instead, you kneel and watch, letting the sun warm your back, letting the smell of damp stone and old wood fill the air around you. Time seems to thin here, to stretch in both directions. You can almost believe that if you lean just a little farther, the water might whisper something. Not a name, but the sound of a moment you've been carrying for longer than you've realized. The wind stirs again. The images fade. All that's left is the water, dark and quiet, waiting for the next person who dares to look. You step back, hands brushing the dust from your palms. The well stands where it always has, patient and unmoving, as though it knows that memory is a deeper kind of water than anything you can draw up with a rope. And with that thought, your walk ends.